What if I told you a narrow strip of water, just a few kilometers wide, has the power to shake the entire world overnight? Not a missile, not a nuclear strike, just a blockade. Because if Iran blocks the Strait of Hormuz, it's not just a regional conflict anymore. It becomes a global crisis. Nearly 20% of the world's oil supply flows through this single choke point. Shut it down, and you don't just stop ships. You stop economies. Fuel prices don't rise slowly. They explode. Markets don't react calmly. They panic. Nations don't wait. They respond. Within days, transportation costs surge. Within weeks, food prices climb. Within months, entire economies begin to strain under pressure. And here's the truth most people ignore. This wouldn't just be Iran versus the world. This would be the moment where geography turns into power, and power turns into global pressure. The real question is not if the world would react. The real question is, how far would it go before it stops? Power doesn't always look like force. Sometimes it looks like control over something everyone depends on. The Strait of Hormuz is not just water. It's leverage, and men instinctively understand leverage. From a man's psychological lens, control equals security. And when a single choke point can influence the flow of global energy, it triggers a primal awareness. Whoever holds that point holds the upper hand. It's not about aggression first. It's about positioning, about knowing that in moments of tension, advantage matters more than intention. Pressure reveals how men respond when control is threatened. And this is where psychology divides perspective. Men often feel the need to act, to secure, to respond with strength when something critical is at risk, while women tend to see the ripple effects first, the families, the stability, the long-term cost of disruption. When energy stops flowing, it's not just fuel, it's livelihoods, routines, and a sense of normalcy that begins to crack. The masculine instinct pushes toward immediate resolution, while the feminine perspective warns of consequences that unfold quietly but powerfully. Scarcity changes behavior faster than conflict ever could. Because when access is limited, fear becomes a driver. And in that moment, control of one narrow passage stops being geography and becomes influence over decisions, emotions, and reactions across the entire world. The moment oil stops flowing, the world doesn't slow down. It jolts into uncertainty. Systems built on consistency suddenly face disruption. And men, wired to protect and provide, feel that shift immediately. It's not just about fuel. It's about control slipping away in real time. When the foundation becomes unstable, the instinct is to act, to regain order, to confront the threat head on before it spreads further. That urgency isn't just strategic, it's deeply psychological, rooted in the need to secure what others depend on. Panic doesn't begin in the streets, it begins in the mind. Men start calculating risks, outcomes, and next moves, often driven by the pressure to fix what feels like it's breaking. Women, on the other hand, sense the human cost faster. The strain on households, the quiet anxiety in daily life, the emotional toll of uncertainty. Where men focus on solving the disruption, women often focus on enduring it, adapting to the changes that ripple through families and communities. Fear spreads faster than oil ever could because once people believe something essential is slipping away, behavior changes instantly. Decisions become reactive, emotions intensify. And what started as a supply disruption quickly transforms into a psychological crisis that influences how both men and women respond under pressure. The rise in fuel. Prices is never just about fuel. It's the first signal that something deeper is shifting. When oil becomes expensive, everything that moves becomes expensive. And men instinctively recognize the chain reaction. There's a psychological weight that comes with knowing that one increase will echo into transportation, production, and ultimately survival. For men, it triggers a need to anticipate, to calculate how far the impact will reach, because the role of provider feels directly under pressure. The real impact shows up where people least expect it, on the table. As transportation costs rise, food prices follow, and what once felt stable begins to feel uncertain. Women often sense this shift faster, not just in numbers, but in daily life. The budgeting, the adjustments, the quiet stress of making sure there's enough. Men may focus on solving the external problem, finding ways to earn more or stabilize income, while women focus on preserving stability within the home despite the external chaos. The domino effect doesn't ask for permission. It unfolds step by step until control feels out of reach. What begins as a spike in fuel becomes a test of resilience, where both men and women are forced to respond, not just economically, but emotionally. As the pressure of scarcity reshapes priorities and decisions, the most devastating battles are not always the ones you can see. They're the ones you feel over time. Economic warfare doesn't explode on impact. It erodes slowly, tightening pressure until systems begin to crack. For men, this kind of threat is unsettling because it can't be confronted in a single decisive move. There's no clear target, no immediate victory, just a growing realization that control is slipping through invisible forces. It challenges the instinct to protect through action, forcing a shift from strength to endurance. The damage shows up in places missiles never are. Homes, routines, and relationships. As costs rise and stability weakens, women often perceive the emotional and social strain first, noticing how uncertainty reshapes daily life. Men may respond by pushing harder, trying to outwork the problem, while women focus on maintaining balance within the chaos, absorbing the stress in ways that often go unseen. This difference isn't conflict, it's contrast in how pressure is processed and managed. The true power of economic warfare lies in how it changes behavior without direct confrontation. When resources tighten, fear influences decisions, and people begin to react instead of plan. What starts as a strategic move on a global scale quietly becomes a psychological battle within individuals, shaping how both men and women think, act, and adapt under prolonged pressure. Silence is rarely neutral when the stakes are this high. It's often interpreted as weakness or hesitation. When a critical lifeline like global energy flow is threatened, global powers don't have the luxury of waiting, because inaction sends a message. From a man's psychological perspective, silence in the face of disruption feels like losing control, like allowing a situation to escalate without resistance. There's an internal pressure to respond, to assert presence, because leadership is often measured by the willingness to act when it matters most. Power carries expectation, and expectation creates urgency that cannot be ignored. Men, especially in positions of authority, are driven by the need to protect systems, alliances, and influence, while women often see the broader human impact of delayed decisions, the uncertainty, the instability, the emotional toll that spreads quietly through societies. Where men may focus on strategic positioning and decisive action, women tend to recognize the cost of waiting, understanding that hesitation can amplify consequence. Sees far beyond the immediate conflict, influence begins to erode the moment it is not exercised. When global powers remain silent, others step in, narratives shift, and control starts to fragment. This isn't just about politics or strategy, it's about perception, confidence, and the psychological balance of power. In moments like these, both men and women respond to signals of strength or absence. Shaping how trust, fear, and stability evolve across the world, a regional conflict becomes a world crisis the moment its impact crosses borders and enters everyday life. What begins as a distant tension suddenly feels immediate, and men instinctively recognize the shift from isolated risk to shared threat. There's a psychological trigger that activates the need to assess, to prepare, to protect, not just territory, but stability itself. It's no longer about who is right or wrong. It becomes about who can maintain control as the consequences begin to spread. Escalation doesn't announce itself loudly. It builds through reactions. One decision led to another. Alliances are tested, and what seemed contained starts expanding beyond intention. Men often respond to this phase with a focus on strategy and containment, driven by the belief that strong action can prevent further breakdown. Women, however, tend to sense the widening human impact earlier. The anxiety in communities, the disruption of normal life, the emotional weight that grows as uncertainty becomes constant. This contrast creates a broader understanding of the crisis, where logic and empathy intersect under pressure. Interconnected systems turn local disruption into global consequence. Trade slows, markets react, and resources become uncertain, affecting people who are far removed from the origin of the conflict. For men, this reinforces the urgency to stabilize and regain control over systems that feel like they're slip. ING. For women, it highlights how fragile everyday security can be, how quickly routines can change when global forces intervene in personal lives. The crisis is no longer defined by geography, but by how deeply it penetrates daily existence. Perception transforms reality when the world starts watching and reacting simultaneously. Confidence drops, fear spreads, and decisions are no longer made in isolation, but under the weight of global attention. Men may feel compelled to project strength and certainty in the face of rising pressure, while women often process the collective emotional atmosphere. Understanding how fear can influence behavior on a massive scale, the moment a regional conflict becomes a world crisis is the moment it reshapes how people think, feel, and respond across borders.